Is Winston Churchill spinning in his grave at being compared to Boris Johnson?
I don't think so, no. There have been plenty of people who I think he would have liked and admired who've been equated with him. Margaret Thatcher also was called the Churchill of her generation. So no, I think the very fact that he would still be considered relevant to modern British politics would please him.
And of course, Churchillian is a very positive adjective to describe any politician.
I think it is, and also somebody who reads a lot, who writes, of course, who was a journalist like Winston Churchill was. I think all these are good things in politics.
And do you see any parallels between the two men, or is that wishful thinking on the Prime Minister's part?
Well, I mean, of course, the pandemic has been a horrific thing, and it's cost the lives of over 3 times more people than died in the Blitz in the Second World War. But they're not to be equated in the same sort of existential crisis. This pandemic has been horrific, but it hasn't been like the Second World War.
About Churchill's qualities, was he particularly intelligent, Andrew?
Oh, yes, he was highly intelligent. Absolutely, he was, yes. He never went to university. He taught himself when he was a subaltern on the northwest frontier of India in the late 1890s. But his reading list and the way in which he mastered the use of the English language, his 37 books, his 800 articles show that he was a highly intelligent man. The way he was able to master complicated scientific theories, for example, show him to have been highly intelligent.
Was he a pragmatist? Was he an improviser? Was he open-minded and flexible? And is that why he was so successful in the Second World War?
He was with regard to politics, but not with regard to strategy and not with regard to principles. He knew he had a sort of a solid North Star that he knew he was working towards, but he was willing to jab and weave in the same way that all politicians do in a democracy.
What were his politics? Was he really a Conservative?
Oh, yes, very much. Although he did spend 20 years as a Liberal MP, that was because the Conservatives moved away from the free trade position in 1904. He came back as soon as the Conservatives returned to free trade. That was one of his political views. They basically came from his father, Lord Randolph Churchill, who was a follower of Benjamin Disraeli. So they're very much in the same one nation Conservative stance that Boris Johnson is, in fact.
And he wore his wit on his sleeve. His humour and his turn of phrase was very much part of his brand.
Yes, one of the great pleasures of being his biographer is that you only have to go 2 or 3 pages into anything he's written or anything he said before you find some absolutely brilliant witty remark or keen aperçu or some wonderful insight.
Your view of revisionist opinions about Churchill and dark aspects of his political and personal past?
Well, he did believe, sadly and unfortunately, in the common view of the day that there were a hierarchy of races. He was born at the same time that Charles Darwin was still alive, and that was considered scientific fact. And so that has blackened his name with certain revisionist historians, but they got it completely wrong when they say, as they have done recently at a conference in Churchill College, Cambridge, of all places, that he was as bad as Hitler or that he hated black people. That is completely untrue. And it's also untrue to say that he made the Bengal famine worse than it was. It was all these accusations of him being a war criminal and a mass murderer are complete rubbish.
The Churchill Foundation having a rebrand, of course, a charity based around his memory, his legacy, removing his photograph from their website. Is that an insult to his memory, do you think?
I don't think so, actually, no. I don't think that that was an updating of the website. I can't get terribly excited about that. This was done by people who love Churchill and relations of Churchill, descendants of Churchill. No, much more serious is is this attack on the very sort of rank of the culture wars over whether or not Churchill was an evil imperialist and so on. I think we can get a bit distracted if we worry about photos on websites, frankly.
And what do you make of the Prime Minister's book about Churchill? It's clearly not as good as yours, but have you read it? What's your appraisal?
I have read it. You're obviously right about your literary appraisal of it, but what you have to remember is that Boris was trying to get a new generation in. So he was writing into interest of Churchill. So he was writing for a young adult audience. It wasn't his final word on Churchill, and it certainly wasn't intending to be a comprehensive cradle to the grave life of Churchill like mine is.
And would you say that Churchill was decisive in our victory over Germany? I mean, clearly the Second World War was a team effort, but do you think that we would have prevailed as Western allies in his absence?
No, I don't, for the simple reason that much of the British establishment in May 1940, including the Foreign Secretary, whose biography I've also written, Lord Halifax, were wanting to make a peace deal with Germany, and it was very much Winston Churchill who outmanoeuvred Lord Halifax over 5 days of negotiations in late May 1940 to ensure that we stayed in the war. And that was a crucial period for the British Empire and Greece, of course, also, to stay in the war and thereby give the United States enough time to rearm and also to show that we were willing to be what we had in the end turned out to be, was the unsinkable aircraft carrier for D-Day.